No, it is not a gift to China. What is important here to figure out is what is it that India wants? Mr. Trump is talking about reciprocal tariff. In the process, what will happen is that India has an $80 billion worth of trade relationship with the United States. Which are the goods and services that US is going to impose the tariff on? China is already the biggest partner of United States when it comes to the volume of trade and the surplus or deficit that each country runs against each other. So there is always a fallout of a decision, one way or the other. So what India has to decide that which are the commodities and services and the products and services that it can afford the tariff. Remember one more thing. In the Indian case itself, Indian automobile, the tariff or the taxes on imported cars is so huge. Yet people in India pay the excessive tariff and taxes on imported cars because they consider it is important for the buyers for one reason or the other. Likewise, on the goods and services that India is not willing to have a compromise on, they will have to handle that. What is important here is again to remember that you definitely get out of the uncertainty that plagues the market. Nobody likes the uncertainty. Once we know 25% or 10%, then it becomes an even playing ground for everybody. India also will impose similar reciprocal tariff on items that India is importing from America. So it is very important that uncertainty goes away. And to that end, whether China gains or Russia gains or anybody else gains, it's always a basis of comparative advantage. That is the quintessential philosophy in economics, that it has to have a comparative advantage. So we do not know the exact goods and services on which these 25% tariff or 10% across the board will be levied. India also will be doing the same thing, reciprocal. So win or lose is a question of a particular sector or the other. But in reality, the going away of uncertainty, in my opinion, is the key element. Vantage China doesn't matter to me, whether so long as it is vantage India in certain other areas or certain areas they have to compromise on. And that's what is important to know, figure that out. Look, this is a very, very interesting situation for America. America hardly manufactures anything that the local consumers consume. Everything is imported, including life-saving drugs and the memorabilia of pins that are made in China. So it will affect the American consumers, certainly. But as I always say, there is a price to pay when you are trying to curb the bigger goal. For the US, the biggest goal is how to curb the deficits. And that's the reason why Mr. Trump is talking about manufacturing in America again. You have seen his EU deal. You have seen the deal that he's claiming to have done with China. India is an uncertain arena right now, but moving forward with certainty. So will the American consumer pay more? Of course it will. The prices will go down with reference to certain areas. So we're talking about food products, for example. Everybody knows now that Canada was charging exorbitant tariff on American dairy products, whereas America was charging so little. Everybody knows that American cars were charged higher tariff in Europe, and European cars were paying only 2%. So there will be a balancing act. So when Trump imposes tariff on European cars, trust me, those people who are buying European cars will pay more. Likewise, it is important to know that many American cars will be able to sell in Europe and now in the same equivalent or equal tariff scenario. So I would say that in any kind of a situation, there is always a give and take. There is always a short-term compromise. There is always a short-term higher price being paid. But what is important is that certainty comes, uncertainty goes away. That's the most critical element of the tariff thing that is happening, because Trump is only trying to do one thing, and that is, why must America, if foreign producers and manufacturers are selling their products in America at very low tariffs, why are we suffering by way of our products going out? So he's trying to bring about a balance. Right or wrong, what will happen, we do not know. So as I always say, my favorite example is that US is suffering from an acute case of financial obesity, whereas we owe so much more money to others that interest debt servicing itself is taking away a lot of gains that America is making. So when you do what I call the extreme fat loss program, sometimes you have to make sacrifices, and that will happen. I would guess so. Because remember one thing, as the data goes, you have seen the recent news that the tariff collections have been so high, running into billions of dollars, that Trump is contemplating issuing a check of $2,400 to Americans because of the tariff surplus that America is collecting. Guess what? This $2,400 to the appropriate sections of the communities that this money will go to, that will allow them to buy certain things. So this is a huge element that one cannot ignore, because Trump is now getting tariff duties, which is going to reduce the deficit to that extent. To what extent it will be is still out in the open. But what is important is that people will begin to see that it's better to manufacture in America and pay less tariff than to manufacture overseas and pay the tariffs here. But it is always a theory of economic advantage, relative advantage. There will be some people who will say it is better to pay the tariff because the cost of production in America is very high, with the minimum wage and other cost of productions being very high. So there will be a rationalization, even in America, in terms of cost of manufacturing. Look at the drug prices. People pay exorbitant amount of money for drug prices that Americans consume here. Highest number of, and if I give you the examples of that, you will almost laugh at it, because it's based on my own personal experience. So for example, azithromycin, I had a throat infection in Mumbai. I bought it from the pharmacy in Mumbai for 115 rupees, a 5-day regimen. Guess what? When I came to the US, the same medicine made in India was selling for $30. So you look at it from that point of view, that Americans are paying so much more because of inequities that exist in certain elements. And that's what is important. Rationalization and bringing about a balance. That is critical. That's Trump's goal. I hope he succeeds, because we Americans are paying exorbitant amount of monies for food items that we consume here. Just like in India, people are paying exorbitant amount of money for the luxury cars that they buy, despite the duties being as high as it is. So this is the important element, the elimination of uncertainty, reducing tightening the belt, financial obesity belt, and also making sure that certain items become reasonably priced. Pharmaceutical is one big thing for America. Thank you very much.